All right. Good morning, fight fans. It is episode 9, I believe, of this kind of haphazard podcast that we do on our drive into work. I am Cage Side Jay. That is Cage Side Mike.
Running a little behind this morning.
We are running a little behind
this morning. For a multitude of reasons.
Because we had a road closure, which was a fun discovery to make on the way into work when you are pressed for time and trying to record a podcast in a car. So we got a little bit of things, a little bit of stuff to talk about this morning. We're going to start with breaking news, so to speak, and that is the announcement or the at least the reported news that Chael Sonnen versus Lyoto Machida will headline Bellator's return to Madison Square Garden later this year. Chael was last seen in the heavyweight Grand Prix. He was finished by Fedor Emelianenko in the semifinals. Lyoto Machida made his debut in Bellator late last year against Rafael Carvalho, won a split decision, and let's start there. What do you think of this fight?
Well, I don't know, headliner for MSG?
We're assuming this is going to be the headliner.
Well, if that's the case, I don't know. I'm not super excited about that fight. I don't know. I don't have much reaction to that, and it does, to me, nothing against those guys, but I don't know. What kind of fight do you think we'll get out of that? Do you think we're going to get another, are we going to get a decision out of this? Do you think, I just think of it and I'm like, yeah, man, is that, if I'm Bellator, I don't know if that's the headliner I want for a return to MSG.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do in the sense of the placement on the card with name value.
Well,
Sonnen is a draw,
yes,
right?
Outside of the name value, but as far as it being like a fight that excites me personally, I guess more maybe a casual fan, they see that name and they go, oh, I'm not super excited for that fight. I don't like saying that, but I'm not super excited about it.
Well, I believe that this is kind of the thought process. Sonnen can promote. Machida is a former UFC champion. These are two of the bigger names in terms of marketing value that Bellator has in their light heavyweight division. A lot of this is going to have to do with what else Bellator can stack on that MSG card. It's in June, so they don't have a whole hell of a lot of time, but they have some time. I mean, we're only in April, so they actually do.
Throw Barnett on there.
Well, that's interesting because Barnett was talking about maybe he'd like to debut in London, but I think this might be a little more practical. I do like the idea of throwing Barnett on there.
I like, for me, to have them say, okay, this is, if he's ready to go, and they can put him on that card, then that makes things a little more interesting, And from what you're saying, yeah, those are Machida and Sonnen. Those are two names that are known, they're marketable. But I don't know, and maybe it's just that Madison Square Garden has always kind of been a special venue, and the expectations that come with that venue of what you're going to see, right? And if that fight, Machida and Sonnen are on that card, that's great. But for a headlining fight, I don't know. Maybe my expectations are kind of skewed because it's Madison Square Garden.
Now, I want to make clear, we are assuming that the headliner is going to be Sonnen versus Machida.
Yes.
It's not officially been confirmed. ESPN is just reporting that fight is on the MSG card. However, last time Bellator went to Madison Square Garden, Sonnen did headline against Vanderlei Silva. So, again, a lot depends on what else is on the card. First of all, Barnett's a good idea. I think you got to stack some of the younger fighters. I think you need to use the names to get the eyeballs, and Bellator has done this historically. You use the names to get the eyeballs, and then you stack on guys like Aaron Pico. I'd like to see AJ McKee on that card. I think that would be interesting, depending on what they're going to do with him, because the featherweight division is a mess right now because Friere's going up and fighting Chandler, and then you've got a Grand Prix starting in the fall. All that having been said, the fight itself, I feel this could turn out to go one of two ways. It's either going to be a 3-round decision, which Machida is almost certainly going to win, or you're going to get a situation like Shogun and Sonnen, where Sonnen caught him. And we forget, because Sonnen's gotten older and he's slowed, and he does a lot of promotion, and we forget that he does have the ability to surprise sometimes. Yeah, his last couple of fights were against, competition that was past its prime in Vanderlei Silva. Fedor he lost to, and then Rampage Jackson he won, and, he went out and he wrestled him. But he actually did try and exchange a little with Rampage. I don't think it's going to be a wise approach against Machida, but there's always that chance that he catches him in something. The merit of this fight is minimal from the Sonnen side, and what I mean by that is you can't justify a title shot for Chael Sonnen if he wins. Where it gets interesting is if Machida wins, because Machida's coming off a win over Carvalho, and if you add on a win over Sonnen and the fact that he left the UFC on a run, on a 2-fight win streak, all of a sudden you've got Lyoto Machida with a 4-fight win streak between 2 major promotions, and nary a challenger to be found at light heavyweight.
That's interesting. That makes it a little interesting, but yeah, I don't know. And not taking anything away from Machida, he's winning.
Well, here's the interesting thing. Ryan Bader's got the title, but he's also at heavyweight. Well, who's Ryan Bader going to fight at light heavyweight in Bellator if he does wind up defending that title? I mean, he's got an opponent in Chuck Congo for the heavyweight strap, but what happens at light heavyweight? Well, no one's screaming for, Bader versus Davis 3 after the last fight.
No.
And Bader has, gone out and won that, and it was a decision, and it wasn't a great fight. Linton Vassal's moved up to heavyweight, and Bader already beat him. Liam McGarry needs to put stuff back together. There's not a ton of options in the weight class right now that scream title shot, which means that Lyoto Machida off a win over Chael Sonnen could very well get the next light heavyweight title shot in Bellator.
And that would be interesting, because I have something, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves on that, but the prospect of him getting that spot in that weight class, that's a fight that would be good to see. I think it goes probably Bader's way on that, if we're going to go that far, because I think Bader is probably at his peak as far as a fighter goes in his career, and he's proven that so far in Bellator.
Well, but let's not forget, and there is a storyline here, Machida knocked out Bader at, back in the UFC when they fought. Now, that was 2012.
Oof.
That was 2012. That was a UFC on Fox card, and it was the co-main event, if I recall, and it did not last long. It was actually second round. It was early in the second round. So there's a storyline there.
Well, they're probably very different fighters now than they were then. That's 7 years ago, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan Bader is a much more developed fighter now than he was back then. And you know what? When you look at Lyoto Machida's wins, Vitor Belfort, front kick, but that was Belfort in his last UFC fight. Carvalho was a split decision in his Bellator debut. Eric Anders is the one that, arguably, Lyoto Machida should not have won that fight. It was a split decision in Brazil. Anders took the fight to him, and that was, we know what judging is like sometimes. Yeah, you hate to say it, but...
Well, judging in Brazil is always, you got to win those fights, or very clearly, and even then. But yeah, if that could be a co-main, going back to the original question, Machida and Sonnen. If that's a co-main on that card, okay, sure, I totally get that, especially name recognition and everything. If it's the main, I'm not super excited about it. There are some interesting things, like you were saying, that come out of that fight. If Machida wins, now we have something to look forward to, perhaps, if he meets up with Bader, which would be interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the best case scenario. And if Sonnen wins, then I don't know what you do other than give him another fight because he's a marketable guy and he's going to talk everything up. But at this point, I like Sonnen better as an analyst, as a podcast guy. I don't know how many more fights he has left in him. He is game. He will fight anyone.
Oh, he's super game. And I have absolutely no problem tuning in to watch him fight. Absolutely no problem, because he does talk trash, but he can back it up for the most part. I don't. He doesn't go in. He's not taking this lightly. He's serious when he steps in the cage.
And Sonnen's trash talk is a pro wrestling style trash talk, and that brings us to our next topic, because we had trash talk erupt on Twitter, and I want to say this with a roll of the eyes that no one listening can see.
That was a good segue, by the way.
Yes. Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov went back at it on social media, on Twitter yesterday, and it all erupted from comments that Nurmagomedov made about Conor and his talk of retiring, and Nurmagomedov essentially compared him to a kind of nagging wife. And McGregor came back, posted a photo of Khabib's wedding, and his wife was in the full burqa, not even eyes showing. It was white, I guess because of a wedding, and he said, "Your wife is a towel." And that erupted into a back and forth with the Khabib side bringing up the rape allegation that Conor McGregor is allegedly under investigation for in Ireland. We say allegedly.
Was it that, or was it sexual assault? Because there is. I've heard both. So I don't.
You know what? From what I've heard, it was penetrative rape, and the problem is we don't know. And I like what Ireland does in this case. I will say they don't name suspects until there are charges, because if it's an unfounded allegation, everybody tries everything in the media. We knew about this story back in December. We didn't report on it. Pretty much everyone knew about this story back in December. No one reported on it until the New York Times did in March, late March. And of course, McGregor's team came out with a response saying, "We don't know why you guys are just reporting on this now. This has been floating around forever. Like, there's nothing new to it." And there's not. Nobody knows anything new. McGregor's not been charged, and everything's alleged. And it does seem a little wonky that, if there was any DNA evidence, well, it doesn't take 4 months to return DNA results. So, I mean, it could be more complex than that. We don't know. That's speculation. But getting back to this, Khabib's team came out, or Khabib came out on Twitter and said, "Well, if my wife's a towel, your corner should have thrown in the towel at UFC 229 and then used the rapist remark." Now, I want to clarify. There is little way of telling whether or not this is Khabib making these comments or his manager, Ali. Ali decided to chime in on his Twitter. I do want to say, I find it the most distasteful thing in the world when a manager tries to insert himself into a spat between two fighters. Your job is to manage and get the best deals for your fighter. It's not the fight their battles for them, and it just rubs me the wrong way. That might only be me, but it just reeks of a lack of professionalism on the part of the manager, and we know that Ali has a long, shady history in the sport, and that's been well documented. Now, aside from that, this began to escalate. Conor came back with the whole, don't be scared of the rematch, you little rat. Then he calls out Dagestani fighters because Ruslan Magomedov, a teammate of Khabib Nurmagomedov, Ruslan Magomedov, a teammate of Khabib Nurmagomedov, was given a permanent ban by USADA recently tested positive for multiple banned substances, then refused a drug test. He was already on his first strike. That gave him 2 more. And the end result is permanent ban. So Khabib came back and said, hey, look at your teammate, another Dagestani getting popped for steroids for...
Wait, you said Khabib, you meant Conor.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Conor came back and said, hey, look at your teammate, another Dagestani getting popped for steroids. And he posted a photo of Khabib and Ruslan. And there's one other fighter, I can't remember if it's Zubraya right now. It was someone else who had tested positive and had a ban as well. Alleging, essentially that Dagestanis are dirty fighters. Then he came back and said, plot twist, it was a goat under the towel, in reference to the photo of Khabib's wife, or the wedding photo with the burqa. You don't know who's under there, so he's like, plot twist, it was a goat. It was going back and forth, and then Dana White released a statement to the media, and then on the UFC's official website, saying, we're going to talk to both parties, this is escalating, and, enough stuff.
Fighting has the component of trash talk, and there's not many fighters that are at the same level as Conor when it comes to that. And Conor, when he says something, there's always a little nugget of truth, for the most part, that I've seen when he brings something up. Now, I know people have gone after Conor for the towel comment and saying, it's racist, and jumped on that right away. I think, people who or I should say, at least from my perspective, I look at it as it's part of fighting, the smack talk. And from what I've seen of Conor historically, he just is quick and he picks those things out. And I don't think there's, I'm not going to say what his intent is, but it doesn't seem like he's doing it for any reason outside of self-promotion, hyping a fight, things like that. Now, you go on the other side of that coin, Khabib, there are fighters in MMA. Vanderlei Silva is a little bit that way, where the line between promotion and it being legitimate is blurred or hard to define. Where
Vanderlei didn't get it, neither does Khabib. There's no promotion for them. They take it personally. To them, if you say this is real. This is real, and they're going to treat it as such. And that's how things, when Khabib's teammates and everything jump the cage. That's how that stuff happens. Without understanding, hey, this, wink, wink, this is our job. We're here to sell the fight, get in there when it's time to go and go. And I don't know. It's an odd thing to stand back and watch, especially if you've been following fighting and watching fighting for a while, and even going back to even boxing, and realizing, it's, as wrestling would say, it's a work. But it only works if both people know it is. If one side doesn't, then it gets really weird. Well, I want to bring up 2 points. One, very quickly, is that it's funny you mentioned the promotion angle. We saw a scuffle between Paulie and Artem, Paulie Malignaggi and Artem at the BKFC Media Day. And there's a question whether or not that was set up. Everyone had their camera out, and BKFC sent us and every other media outlet the video. Yeah, we posted it. I debated whether or not to.
We talked about this yesterday, too.
Yeah, and you know what? But in the middle of it, Paulie's yelling out, well, I just did that to promote. And you know what? If it's staged like that, I'm not a fan of the trash talk. I'm not. I am a fan of the sport of MMA. I don't need this ridiculous attempt at promotion, because if it's staged, it's not genuine. And I don't need it. I don't need it to enjoy a fight.
That's the thing. It has to have a genuine feel to it, right? And, we talked about this yesterday. I watched that video to see, is it set up? It might be. If it was a setup and planned, it was probably one of the more well done kind of setup promotion style encounters. But then it also goes to, a fight is a fight, but if you add a little bit of a story to it, it becomes a little more interesting to a lot of fans, maybe some more casual fans. It's an easier way to sell a fight, and I think that's what they're looking to. So, especially these days, when things in MMA and combat sports are moving more towards that self-promotion, trying to get as many eyes on it as possible. Muhammad Ali, he was great at that stuff. But it always came off as fairly genuine. He was sharp. It wasn't this, like, over kind of manufactured conflict or personal grudge that was inserted into it like we get today.
Now, I wanna ask you two questions. So I'm gonna throw them both out there right now. One, the Nevada Athletic Commission, when they were hearing the Conor Khabib brawl case and handing out the suspensions, one of the commissioners, I believe it was Anthony Marnell, said, you know what, we want to look at curtailing this escalating speech between fighters. They were basically talking censorship. Dana White came out and said, that's crazy. How are you going to do that? That's a First Amendment issue. So what is your take on all of a sudden Dana being the one to come out and try and put a stop to this? Two, did McGregor cross the line with the towel comment?
One, I don't always agree with Dana, but 100%, it's ridiculous. And it's a little different because they have the First Amendment. We're in Canada, we don't really have that. But one, how do you control it? Do you make the fighters accountable? Do you make the UFC accountable for that? That may be part of the angle that Dana's coming from. Are they going to be responsible for what their guys say? But
again, Dana came out and said that, but now he's the one who's trying to curtail them. He's the one who's saying, hey guys, stop it.
But I think that's within his right. As the promoter, if his guys step out of line, he's their boss. And I think if he sees things getting out of hand, especially, they're not promoting a fight. There's nothing coming up. So I think it's his way to kind of, before this gets really out of hand, for him to kind of step in and say, guys, okay, like, I get it, but you need to chill out. And I think that's it. As far as that goes, fighting's fighting. Like I was saying, this has been around. Trash talk's been around. It's in every sport. And I don't think it's competition. And some of it's real and some of it isn't. And I don't think it's anyone's right to step in and tell these guys they can't say things, right? And that's what it is. It's especially in the United States. They have that right to say what they want.
Now, the flip side of that is there's consequences to what you say.
Yes.
And keep in mind, the reason that Dana White can step in and say knock it off is he can use that rarely enforced UFC fighter code of conduct. Because the UFC is a private enterprise. The First Amendment applies to public. It applies to the government. It doesn't apply to the UFC or Twitter or anything else. Now, again, did he go too far by saying your wife is a towel?
Well, personally for me, when I read it and then I saw the picture, I was like, that's kind of funny. Did it go too far? You know what? I'm of the belief that you can make fun of whatever you like, but that's not quite the environment that exists, and people like to pick apart the intent of what you're saying. I think that in situations like that, where it's almost a conversation and you're going back and forth and you have to have that sharp return, I think Conor saw that, or at some point someone showed him a picture of that and he went, hey, it looks like he's sitting beside a towel. Or someone said that and he thought it was funny and that was it. I don't believe, or it's probably very unlikely, that with everything he has going on, he's sitting around coming up with hateful, prejudiced things to say about Khabib. I don't know. I don't think most people have that in them. So I think that he saw it and he was like, yep, that's what it is, and he threw it out there, and some people will think it's funny and some people will be offended by it.
There might not have been a lot of thought behind it.
I don't think there is.
People jump to the racism thing, and the ones who did kind of forgot that Islam's not a race, it's a religion. That's a religious, item. And, in the 90s, if you grew up in the 90s, the burqa was railed against as oppressive to women. The mindset on that has changed, saying it's part of their religion, it's their choice. There's a question of how much choice you get in certain cultures as a woman as to whether or not, are you just being told that you must wear this? That's where the resistance to it came out. I think what Conor did was just say, that looks like a towel. I don't think there was any, discriminatory intent behind it, but then it wasn't the smartest thing to say in this day and age.
Well, but also I don't think Conor really gives a shit. Like, and in a way, I do appreciate that about him, and same with the Diaz brothers.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is he did come out after all was said and done and posted a bit of an apology. He took the wife post down. He took the towel post down.
I saw that.
He came out and made a statement saying he wants to move forward with fans of all faiths and that all faiths are inspiring. So he put a little positive message out there probably after Dana and the UFC went and talked to him and said, hey, this has to stop. Yeah. We don't want another UFC 229 situation.
Yeah. I don't see a problem with it. I think that being, looking for the sinister intent in everything that people say and do, that's not me, and I look at it as he went off the cuff. When people get into verbal disagreements and they're going back and forth, I find people like to pick a quick, easy thing to pull out. And he probably just saw that picture and said, hey man, this is what it is, and put it out there. Didn't think much about it. And the problem is, today, if you throw something out there like that, there's 24/7 news coverage, well, like we're doing, and that gives people a lot of time to imply what your intent was for something that you maybe spent less than a minute thinking about.
That's interesting. I mean, we resisted covering these tweets the entire day yesterday. I flat out said I didn't want to report on them. And we didn't until Dana White released a statement. And that's because I don't want to give a platform to people who are just talking trash on Twitter. That's not news. And we cover that as scarcely as possible, usually only when something major comes of it, like a fight winding up getting booked. In this case, because Dana reacted to it, we eventually did greenlight a very brief article, and the focus of it was this has actually caused Dana and the UFC to come out and address the situation.
Well, and I think that's more newsworthy that the UFC now, or Dana representing them, has to come out and say, hey guys, this is, I think that is newsworthy. Two people going back and forth over Twitter about kind of nonsense for the most part.
It's two grown men who, if they wanted to settle their differences, one, they already had the opportunity. And I've said this about Khabib all along. Khabib won that argument. He won the fight. And then went and jumped the cage anyways.
Well, this is the thing. So, going back, Conor's trash talking. Khabib maybe doesn't see it as much like that and takes it more personally. What is the finality to that? He already beat him in the cage, right? What from Khabib's standpoint is the acceptable conclusion to their disagreement?
I don't think Khabib, and again, this might be a cultural thing. It might just be who he is. I don't think he's capable of letting go. And that's a problem, to be honest. And that's something where the UFC is going to have to get in eventually and say, look, buddy, this is done. Like, if they fight again and Khabib wins again, does he let it go then? I don't know that he would.
I don't know.
So
it doesn't feel that way. I don't know what the conclusion of that conflict is with them.
And there's a lot of issues here, because the one thing in fighting is it's a global sport, and that's bringing together cultures with very different standpoints. And you saw this with this play back in Dagestan, and some of the things with Khabib coming out and saying, hip-hop, it shouldn't be allowed in the country, and this, that, and the other thing, is that, at some point, this does speak to a larger issue, and it speaks to cultural conflicts, and they're going to be very murky waters to navigate. All right, we've navigated our drive into work. We're at the end of the drive in. Leave us some comments and everything below, guys.
Thank you very much, guys.